I represented Wall Street as a senator from New York, and I went to Wall Street in December of 2007, before the big crash that we had.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor to introduce the senator from New York and the leading candidate for the Democratic nomination, Hillary Rodham Clinton.
In December 2007, 10 months before George Bush would bail out the banks for the 2008 global financial collapse, Hillary Clinton gave a speech to NASDAQ. NASDAQ is the second largest stock exchange behind Wall Street's New York Stock Exchange. Hillary has refused to release the transcripts from her paid speeches for Goldman Sachs.
One of the things that Senator Sanders points to, and a lot of your critics point to, is you made 3 speeches for Goldman Sachs. You were paid $675,000 for 3 speeches. Was that a mistake? I mean, was that a bad error in judgment?
Look, I made speeches to lots of groups. I told them what I thought. I answered questions.
But did you have to be paid $675,000?
Well, I don't know. That's what they offered.
Excerpts from Hillary's NASDAQ speech may give a glimpse of what those speeches sounded like and why she won't release her Goldman Sachs transcripts.
It is a real pleasure to be here, and I appreciate those kind words. It's wonderful being back in the city.
She thanks the bankers who support her.
As I started traveling around the country last winter, I would be in small groups with my supporters and a lot of my wonderful donors, some of whom are here today. I see a lot of people who I recognize in this audience that are integral to what happens in our markets.
She defends Wall Street fraud and the brokers who used predatory lending. Predatory lending was used by banks to entrap primarily unsuspecting blacks and Hispanics.
Now, we can debate what was technically illegal. We can debate what should be defined as predatory.
As a refresher, Goldman Sachs made $13 billion doing this, but Goldman Sachs was only fined $550 million.
Now, who's exactly to blame for the housing crisis? Well, that's always a question that the press and people ask, and I think there's plenty of blame to go around.
Bloomberg Businessweek magazine would be criticized later for a racist cover depicting greedy blacks and Hispanics as responsible for the collapse in the home mortgage market.
Now, these economic problems are certainly not all Wall Street's fault, not by a long shot. Talking with a lot of homeowners who had gotten into subprime mortgages, they fit the profile. Many were first-time homeowners, and certainly borrowers share responsibility as well. Home buyers who paid extra fees to avoid documenting their income should have known they were getting in over their heads.
Hillary sticks up for the middle class needing more money, and in the same speech flip-flops on the middle class having a savings problem.
We need to change our tax code to reward middle-class families, and by doing so, we can get money into the pockets of tens of millions of people who will spend it. We also have a savings crisis. We have the lowest rate of savings since 1929, and coincidentally, we have the highest income inequality gap since 1929. That was not a good year for America.
Furthermore, she seems to be smiling, talking about the crisis the middle class faces, and acknowledges that Bill Clinton and her made tens of millions of dollars, saving more money than middle-class Americans because of tax breaks for the Clintons and the rest of the 1%.
You know, this has been one of the most heartbreaking elements of this crisis. We have, as my husband and I often say, certainly benefited over the last 7 years of this administration, as we've seen the vast majority of Americans basically stall.
It has been reported you've made $5 million making speeches. The president's made more than $100 million.
Well, if you have no reason to remember, but we came out of the White House not only dead broke, but in debt.
One of the things they are attacking her about is the Clinton Foundation and the big speaking fees her husband, the former president, takes. I want you to listen to Bill Clinton yesterday. He's talking to Cynthia McFadden of NBC News. He's on a trip to Africa for the Clinton Foundation. And he's asked here about his speaking fees, including, remember, one of the big controversial ones is a $500,000 speaking fee from a Moscow bank at the very time that bank was part of a deal to get a uranium deal for the Russian government.
Will you continue to give speeches?
Oh, yeah. I got to pay our bills.
I got to pay our bills? The Arkansas governor didn't make a lot of money. As president, he had a pretty good salary. I understand they weren't rich when they left the White House. But I got to pay our bills?
Hillary does acknowledge that there was wrongdoing on behalf of Wall Street.
If we're honest, we need to acknowledge that Wall Street has played a significant role in the current problems, and in particular in the housing crisis. But finally, responsibility also belongs to Wall Street, which not only enabled but often encouraged reckless mortgage lending. I believe Wall Street shifted risk away from people who knew what was going on onto people who did not.
Not once throughout this NASDAQ speech does Hillary mention seeking arrests for fraudulent and illegal activity on Wall Street, but rather considers pardoning some.
I'm prepared to consider giving legal protection to servicers and others who administer these loans and who do the right thing by balancing the interests of homeowners, the investors, and our economy.
She also asks them to volunteer their help, but not turn anyone in that was committing fraud.
I urge Wall Street and the mortgage industry to voluntarily agree to the following 3 steps. If we cannot reach a voluntary agreement, I will consider legislation to address the problem.
Wall Street is in New York City, and the crash happened while Hillary was New York's senator. She remained New York's senator for 13 more months after the $700 billion bailout to the banks, but she made zero progress on helping regulate the banks.
CBS News Special Report, a presidential address to the nation.
As a result, our entire economy is in danger. We are in the midst of a serious financial crisis, and the federal government is responding with decisive action.
In 2007 and 2008, out of the 140 bills Clinton introduced during that period, 5 were related to housing finance or foreclosures, according to congressional records, including one aimed at making it easier for homeowners facing foreclosure to get their loans modified. Only one of the 5 secured any co-sponsors. New York Senator Chuck Schumer signed onto a bill that would have helped veterans refinance their mortgages. No Senate committee took action on any of the bills, and they died without further discussion. The Dodd-Frank Act was passed in 2010 to help regulate Wall Street and stop the illegal activity. It was introduced in Congress by the then Financial Services Committee Chairman Barney Frank, and in the Senate Banking Committee by former Chairman Chris Dodd. Connecticut Senator Chris Dodd was the main sponsor of a sweeping housing and mortgage law that was intended to rescue about 15% of the cash-strapped homeowners in fear of foreclosure in 2009. George Bush signed this bill into law in July 2008. Hillary praises the Dodd-Frank Act.
The Dodd-Frank bill, and then to sign it, was one of the most important regulatory schemes we've had since the 1930s. So I'm going to defend Dodd-Frank.
I support Dodd-Frank.
Hillary praises the Dodd-Frank Act. But where did Senator Clinton stand on Dodd's housing and mortgage law that would have helped the middle-class families? That legislation was voted on 3 times in the Senate in 2008, in addition to a few procedural votes related to the bill. Clinton missed votes in February and April when she was running for president, but also missed votes in late June after she had dropped out of the contest. On July 26th, when the bill passed, Clinton was there to vote in support. Senator Dodd summarized the bill's journey and, in a floor speech, praised 13 other senators for their help. Clinton's name was not among them.
I represented Wall Street as a senator from New York, and I went to Wall Street in December of 2007, before the big crash that we had, and I basically said, cut it out.
Hillary Clinton has said that she stood up to the banks.
I stood up against the behaviors of the banks when I was a senator. I called them out on their mortgage behavior.
This was what Hillary was referring to when she called the Wall Street bankers out.
Don't wait for the administration or Secretary Paulson to call. Call yourself. Wall Street needs to be part of a comprehensive solution that brings to the table all those responsible and calls on them to do their part.
Secretary Clinton called them out. Oh my goodness, they must have been really crushed by this.
Hillary Clinton has claimed that there's been no evidence that money she received from Wall Street has influenced any of her policies.
Which really comes down to, anybody who ever took donations or speaking fees from any interest group has to be bought. And I just absolutely reject that, Senator. And I really don't think these kinds of attacks by insinuation are worthy of you. And enough is enough. If you've got something to say, say it directly. But you will not find that I ever changed a view or a vote because of any donation that I ever received.
Hillary Clinton received $100,000 from Denise Rich for Hillary's 2000 Senate race in New York. Hillary was sworn in as New York Senator, and 2 weeks later, President Bill Clinton pardoned Denise Rich's ex-husband, fugitive billionaire Mark Rich, on Bill's last day as president.
Constitution of the United States.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Massachusetts Senator Elizabeth Warren, a former Harvard Law School professor and author, explained in 2004 how Hillary Clinton was persuaded by Wall Street to support a bankruptcy bill that would make it harder for Americans to wipe out their debts.
One of the first bills that came up after she was Senator Clinton was the bankruptcy bill. This is a bill that's like a vampire. It will not die, right? There's a lot of money behind it, and
Bill her husband had vetoed.
Her husband had vetoed it very much at her urging.
And?
She voted in favor of it.
Why?
As Senator Clinton, the pressures are very different. It's a well-financed industry.
Anybody who knows me, who thinks that they can influence me, name anything they've influenced me on. Just name one thing.
The Washington Post also stated that Elizabeth Warren blamed Clinton's about-face as a senator on the impact of campaign contributions. The bill was essentially the same, but Hillary Rodham Clinton was not, Warren wrote. Hillary Clinton could not afford such a principled position. Campaigns cost money, and that money wasn't coming from families in financial trouble. Out of Hillary's top 6 donors, 4 of them are Wall Street banks. This is Lloyd Blankfein, the CEO of Goldman Sachs. He ran the company as it committed fraud and remains the CEO of Goldman Sachs today. Blankfein is a big supporter of Hillary Clinton and says that he supported her.
You've said you have always been a fan of Hillary Clinton. She's spoken at Goldman events before. Will you endorse her?
Say what is on record. I have supported Hillary in all our other ventures in government.
Blankfein has also supported Larry Summers. Larry Summers was one of the Treasury secretaries under Bill Clinton and helped to deregulate Wall Street. On April 16, 2008, Larry Summers received $135,000 for a one-day visit to Goldman Sachs. The payment was made at a time, in April 2008, when everyone assumed that the next president would either be Barack Obama or Hillary Clinton, and that Larry Summers would therefore become exactly what he is now, the most influential financial official in the U.S. government. Goldman would not be able to make a one-day, $135,000 payment to Summers now that he is Obama's top economics advisor. But doing so a few months beforehand was obviously something about which neither party felt any compunction. It's basically an advanced bribe.
You made 3 speeches for Goldman Sachs. You were paid $675,000 for 3 speeches. Was that a mistake? I mean, was that a bad error in judgment?
Look, I made speeches to lots of groups. I told them what I thought. I answered questions.
But did you have to be paid $675,000?
Well, I don't know. That's what they offered. So
just to be clear, that's not something you regret, those 3 speeches,
no,
that money?
I don't, because I don't feel that I pay any price for it, and I am very clear about what I will do, and they're on notice.
So I'm just putting all my banking friends on notice. And I do appreciate the work that Goldman itself has done. So thanks to Goldman Sachs.
You don't think they expect anything in return?
Absolutely not. First of all, I was a senator from New York. I took them on when I was senator.
Let the voters decide. Play it forward.